The Detroit Tigers win a playoff game at Comerica Park in the first time in over a decade.
Thanks to another huge moment by Francisco Lindor, the New York Mets are heading to the NLCS.
The Seahawks and 49ers will rekindle their rivalry.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
We're so back. We are, what an absolute electric factory the city of Detroit really was. I tweeted this out, but like everybody in the city is talking. I live downtown. Everybody in the city is talking about the Detroit Tigers. I walk across the street to go, get breakfast from the market, and I'm picking up, newspapers that about the Tigers, and all the workers there are wearing Tigers gear and talking about it. They are the talk of the town, and they backed it up with a huge win on Wednesday night. That is a 3-0 victory in Game 3 of the ALDS. They now have a 2-1 series lead. The final 2 games of this series, should you need them both, are a home game and then a Tarek Skubal start. You are in the driver's seat. This was a huge win. And that's not like jumping the gun. That's not me saying the series is over. And AJ Hinch very much has preached one game at a time all season. That's how they got themselves here, right? You got a long road ahead of you. This thing isn't even close to reaching final destination. But home game and Tarek Skubal on the road in the final 2 games is exactly where this team wanted to be after 3 games. Exactly where they wanted to be. Literally best case, I guess, would be they just sweep them. But if you were to ask most of the coaches and honestly most of the fans, I would venture to guess most people would have said, if we can split in Cleveland and take the first game at home, we're going to be set up really, really nicely. This is very close to best case scenario. They get a win in front of over 44,500 fans in Comerica Park. Bleachers, standing room only, everything filled. It's a playoff record for attendance at Comerica Park. The highest attendance for a playoff game in Comerica Park history. And that's only game 1, baby. They could clinch on Thursday, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show. What went right? I think we could talk about some big hits in this game, and we will. We'll talk about some big defensive plays. We'll talk about some other stuff surrounding this impressive victory, but I really do. I'm going to continue pounding this drum, y'all. Like, I really do think that this conversation starts and ends with the bullpen success that this team has seen over the last 2 months. The Tigers in bullpen games, it's funny. The Dodgers were catching heat all over the internet because they're doing something, I don't know about like a pure bullpen game, but they're doing like like not a starting pitcher they intended on going into the season, and then he's going to have a short leash, and they're going to go with a lot of relievers in their upcoming game, and they got a bunch of crap for it on the internet, like, oh, look, the Dodgers, the big bad Dodgers with all their money are doing, a bullpen game type of thing. It's like the opposite. The Tigers are so on an island with this mindset. I have people all the time that are like, oh, who's going to start the next game for you? It's like, have you not gotten this yet? If it's not Tarek Skubal, there's no starting pitcher, bud. Like that's really what it has come down to over the last 2 months. And AJ Hinch has been an absolute master with managing these bullpen games, and the Tigers' record and the Tigers' success in these bullpen games is just unprecedented. Like it's absolutely phenomenal. Cater Montero starts this game 1 inning of perfect ball on 6 pitches. And I thought some people were like, oh, like maybe he'll go out there for, the second or maybe even first time through the lineup. No, immediately yanked. Brant Herter comes in. Not the cleanest performance we've seen from him, but good enough. 3 1/3, 5 hits, no earned runs, 1 walk, 1 strikeout. The mindset here was get through the entire lineup one time. And then when the lineup turns over and it's still, Kwan and they got some lefties up top, then you'll turn the lineup over and get him out again as well. Then we'll go to the back half of the bullpen once the team is in, the 4th or 5th inning, presumably. And that's exactly what happened. Brant Herter is such a phenomenal, success story for this team this year. Can give you multiple innings. If they, if this was June or May, like he would be in line to probably start, like truly start, real start a couple of ball games. And I think the thing that has been so impressive about him is that obviously he's tough against lefties because he has that biting, big, loopy slider that he can throw low and away to them. But he's been phenomenal against righties. Absolutely phenomenal. And that has given him a lot of leash and a lot of leeway and a lot of confidence from this coaching staff throughout this run. And this game was just yet another example of that. Then you get to I'm highly debating calling these two guys the two MVPs of the postseason so far. You get Bo Brisky and Will Vest back to back. Sean Gunther enters the game, gives up a couple of base runners. They go to Bo Brisky. We talked about this on yesterday's show. AJ Hinch had a quote going into the series where he's like, this is paraphrasing, but he essentially said, if stuff gets really thick and really rough out there, right, and they're in a really bad situation, they have Bo Brisky. And I think that that's genuinely how everybody in the clubhouse feels too. This dude is as cool as a cucumber, just cool, calm, and collective, zero nerves, doesn't show emotion after he gets out of it either, just waltzes up there, 2 innings of perfect baseball with 3 strikeouts. He has a 0 ERA in the postseason. He hasn't allowed a hit yet in the postseason. Has pitched in almost every game. Just absolutely phenomenal. Has been a superstar this postseason. And then you have Will Vest. Over in an inning of perfect ball. 1 strikeout. That strikeout obviously was to end his outing. Got everybody fired up. Man, his fastball, I know this is a broken record, and I'm just repeating myself for like every single time he enters a ball game. This is the conversation we have, but it's unreal how good his fastball is. It's wild. And he continues this stretch of just being completely unhittable over the last month and a half. Will Vest and Bo Brisky, I'm serious. I think there's a legitimate, not only argument, but potentially even winning argument that those two guys have been the MVPs of the postseason so far. Tarek Skubal, I guess, is obviously an easy candidate for that as well. We'll talk about another guy on the offensive side of the ball who could work his way into that conversation too. And then Tyler Holton, obviously 1 inning of perfect ball to end the ball game. It's a big strikeout to end as well. Shows some emotion on the mound. I think that's really great for a lot of reasons. One, just Tyler Holton's really good, and so throwing him out there in a save situation is awesome. I want everyone to notice no Foley yet again. I really do think AJ is like, we need swings and misses. We need strikeouts, and that's why Vest, Brisky, and Holton have been getting so much more work than Foley. But I think that one of the things that I love about going to Holton specifically there is the fact that his last time out there, he got popped by Cleveland. And him going out there, getting a 1-2-3 inning against the team that, punched him in the mouth is I think, such a good confidence booster for him the rest of this series, should they need him again. And then obviously, if the Tigers get past the ALDS, then going forward as well.
Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live event even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.
What a game. The New York Mets, who were down and out at the end of May, have been the best team in baseball since June, and they have now proven that they were the best team in the National League East this year, and they'll have a chance against one of these NLCS powerhouses, whether it's the Padres or the Dodgers, to prove that they were the best team in the National League this season. What an unbelievable run. We will talk about the game, but man, oh man, we'll just throw some comments up. Lindor, love this team. LFGM, like, let's go. What an unbelievable season and an unbelievable game. There's one moment to talk about before anything else, and that is the grand slam by Francisco Lindor, because the New York Mets early in this game, it was looking like the type of game where the Phillies could have got back into this series because Ranger Suarez was not sharp. The Mets had multiple bases loaded opportunities where they just were expanding the zone, not being themselves. And it's understandable. You're trying to make something happen. You're being aggressive. You see the writing on the wall. You want to get the job done. You don't want to go back and face Zach Wheeler at Citizens Bank Park. And the Phillies really kept Wheeler in the back pocket. They said they were going to go with Ranger Suarez in the bullpen to try to get the job done, and they would have had an advantage in that Game 5. So you're staring up against that. Very similar to, I think, 1986, before my time, where they didn't want to face, what was it, Dick Scott with the scuffed baseball, so they had to win Game 6. Kind of a similar vibe, right? You had to win this game, and there was so many chances early where the Mets just could not get that big hit with runners in scoring position. Jose Quintana was brilliant. The Mets just hung in there, and then finally you get the right guy up. And the right guy is Francisco Lindor. This season, I love this comment. We'll throw this one up. Lindor haters are real quiet. That's absolutely right, because it's Mike Scott, by the way. Someone corrected me. Mike Scott. Showing my age here. You know, Francisco Lindor, this is his season where he has cemented himself as one of the best players in franchise history and shown why the Mets gave him $341 million. He has been unbelievable. You go back to where this all started, the players only meeting, and I've talked about it so many times on the show, but it's worth repeating now as the Mets have done this incredible thing to get to the NLCS on Lindor's huge home run. Again, he sets up that meeting. They talk about accountability. He stands in front of the media for 13 minutes, answers every question, showing that he is adept at now being a leader in New York City. And he goes out the next day. The lineup wasn't good the next day. Francisco Lindor goes 4 for 4, puts the first run on the board with the home run. It just does everything. I believe he scored the winning run in that game. And time again, Francisco Lindor comes up in the big moment and comes through. Here he was, grand slam. And after an entire game where the Mets just could not get the big hit, they get the biggest hit. And all of a sudden, it goes from a game where it's just every run matters so much, and obviously it still did, but to have some breathing room for the end, it was just exactly what this team needed. And you watch this group celebrating, the tears streaming down Brandon Nimmo's face, tears streaming down Lindor's face, Mendoza, all these guys coming together. You look at these two clubs, and the Phillies, when these two teams met for the London series, the Phillies were the best team in baseball. They were riding the momentum of 2 deep playoff runs in 2022 and 2023. They were a team that had been together, and they hit the ground running. They were unbelievable to start the season. The Mets, not so much. They meet in that London series. The two teams part ways. The Phillies play basically 500 baseball for 4 months, and the New York Mets are the best team in the game. But because the Phillies had that padded record from early on, everyone believes they're going to win this series. Everyone still thinks that the Phillies are the team to beat. They're the favorites. The Mets are a better team than the Philadelphia Phillies, and they showed that in every single game this series. It took everything breaking the Phillies' way in Game 2 to even push this series to 4 games. The Mets deserve this, and they became an amazing team. Like, team is a big part of this. When you see the way these guys are responding to each other, how they're pulling for each other, how you have, Sean Manaea starting, all the pitchers got 59 on their eye black. Not sure if they did it today for Quintana. I didn't catch that, but the way they're celebrating each other, the way they love each other, they have become a unit that pulls on the rope together. And here they are in the NLCS. It's an incredible story. I feel like this has become my favorite Mets season of my lifetime. There's this in 2015 for me, Mets fans of my age. I'm 29 years old, who weren't alive for the 86 run and all those runs in the 80s. This team has just been so special. And to get the performances they got in this clincher, for Jose Quintana to be so sharp, he was pitching significantly better than Ranger Suarez, but the results were the same. And he just kept on making big pitch after big pitch after big pitch to get you through the bulk of this game. Reed Garrett comes on. What an incredible story Garrett was this year. A guy that the Mets picked up off of waivers last year, didn't even make the opening day roster. Think about how many guys you can say that about that are on this team making huge contributions, from Mark Vientos to Jose Iglesias. And again, Garrett in that spot gets 2 huge strikeouts to get you through that inning. David Peterson comes on, gets the final out of that 6th inning, gets you through the 7th and the 8th. Peterson, an unbelievable story. First-round pick for this franchise, who took some time to materialize into this version of himself. And now here he is. How many big outs has he gotten in this postseason? He was the one that got the save to clinch the wild card round. He got big outs in Game 1 and Game 4, the crucial games of this series. David Peterson, a central figure. And sure enough, when it comes to the pitching side, it ends with Edwin Diaz. And Edwin Diaz, like any Mets closer should, or not should, but typically does, he made us sweat. He really did. Walks the first 2 batters. I think everybody was screaming at their TV, wondering why the Mets didn't just stick with Peterson, because he was rolling. He was pitching to contact. He was throwing strikes. But ultimately, Edwin Diaz gets a big strikeout to lock himself back in, gets a fly out, and gets to square off against Kyle Schwarber, a guy who he's owned in his career. Up to that point, 0 for 9 with 7 strikeouts. He strikes him out once again, despite the best efforts of the Fox crew, noting their career histories, noting the fact that one big swing from Schwarber would have tied the game. And the Mets get the job done. It's just an unbelievable series that the Mets just played, an unbelievable run. And this team, you're watching them, and you really have to feel like there's a chance that we're watching a World Series team. I mean, they got to win 8 more games. Whoever they face off with is not going to be easy in the NLCS, whether it's the Padres or the Dodgers. And we'll have plenty of time to talk about that. That series is not going to begin until Sunday, which means we all get a couple of days just to embrace what has been such a great season for the Mets. And I want to spend more time on Francisco Lindor in a second here, because what Lindor has done, it's just been the best season that I've ever seen a New York Met have. And David Wright had some good seasons. Carlos Beltran had some good seasons. I'm sure there's Mike Piazza, of course, had some great seasons. But Francisco Lindor has had the best season I have ever seen. It has been an absolute pleasure to be covering it on this show every single day for all of these months now. And I want to continue to shower him with praise, because it's just been a remarkable series of huge moments. And for Lindor to have the huge home run against the Braves to clinch a playoff berth, and now to clinch the NLCS, coming through with that grand slam, it's Hollywood script stuff.
Stacey, talk about a night for New York sports.
That's right. Yes, there were other things going on, but the most important thing, at least for us, the Yankees, but we'll talk all about it. Before we get started, don't forget, subscribe to the podcast on whichever podcasting platform you prefer. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube, like our videos, hit the bell so you're notified when those videos go live, leave comments. So today's live show, previewing Game 4, because finally it's a back-to-back days with games. So we have a game, and we'll be discussing the other big night in New York sports. But first, let's talk about our Yankees, because this is a Yankees podcast, and yay, hallelujah.
Yeah, I said on the short that I posted for the post game, who the heck had Giancarlo Stanton stealing a base on their bingo card? Yankees had 4 hits tonight. Giancarlo Stanton had 3 of them. For whatever I've been a defender of Giancarlo Stanton. I do want to say this from the beginning. The entire time, not the beginning of our show, the beginning of them trading for him. Yankee fans, for whatever reason, maybe because he's not homegrown, I don't know what it is, love to hate Giancarlo Stanton. I don't know why. Every year he is a consistent 30 home runs, 80 RBIs for them. Yes, his average is low, but we know what he is. And he never has created a problem in the media, never has had a problem outside of the team. He has done, he's never said one cross word about the Yankees, ever. He has been a model citizen here, and for some reason, Yankee fans love to complain about him. And by the way, can we mention before praising him more? Yankee fans love to over-exaggerate how much money Giancarlo Stanton actually makes.
I was gonna...
love to.
Yeah.
If you listen to local sports radio, all you hear is he makes 30, 35, 40, 45. Let me clear this up, please. Giancarlo Stanton counts for $22 million against the Yankees luxury tax every year. The Marlins eat $8 million of it per year. He makes $30 million a year. He counts for $22 million towards the luxury tax. For a 240 hitter that hits 30 home runs, 80 RBIs a year, $22 million is unbelievably affordable. Unbelievably affordable. For a model citizen who really just can't field and run the bases. He's a DH. Who couldn't do that either?
Except
Big
for tonight.
Poppy.
Yeah.
Big Poppy couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Lots of DHs in the history of baseball couldn't do that. Unbelievable night for him. And the only other thing about Stanton that I could absolutely always say, we've done all postseason pretty much is complain about Judge, right? Giancarlo Stanton has always hit in the postseason for them.
Yep.
Always.
Yep. There was an interesting stat where they said the only guy who's hit more home runs in the postseason, like average wise, per at bat or what, Babe Ruth.
Yeah, pretty good. And remember, Giancarlo Stanton, I don't think he played in a postseason game with the Marlins because they were always terrible when he was there. So he's only done the postseason games in the Yankees. And pretty much since he's gotten here, they've missed the postseason 1 year that he's been here. So he's been in the postseason almost every year since he's been here. And he's been healthy for the postseason. He has been a consistent performer for them in the postseason every single year. He's batting. You got to remember, too, they acquire Juan Soto. He's batting lower in the lineup. Never heard a peep out of him.
No.
He gets hurt multiple years, misses a lot of time. Yankee fans eviscerate him on the radio, on Twitter, everywhere. Never heard a peep out of him.
No.
Brian Cashman, the GM of the team, called him out. Never heard a peep out of him. Giancarlo Stanton has never caused one issue with this team. And for some reason, it's got to be Timmy because they didn't draft him, which is a Yankee fan bias thing that I don't know where it comes from, but it is the truth. That they just hate on him. But I'm sorry, $22 million a year, consistent at the plate. I can't complain about Giancarlo Stanton. He proved once again that he is a major, major piece of this team because other than him and Juan Soto, they weren't hitting tonight.
No. I will say there were some good at-bats. Volpe, Cabrera.
Volpe had a really good at-bat, yeah.
Let's not discuss Verdugo swinging on the first pitch after the 2 guys ahead of him worked walks and then grounded out for the 3rd out, because if I were sitting next to a wall, I probably would have punched it because I was like, you could have broken the game open there, or at least not done what you always do, grounding the ball to the right side. But there were some good at-bats. Lugo wasn't as scary as he was in that start in September, which was a good thing.
Wasn't horrible either, though.
Right. He wasn't horrible. He wasn't as dialed in. And I was a little worried after the first inning that maybe he would get dialed in, but they knocked him out pretty early, which I was happy about. But if it weren't for Stanton, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about a win. Also, they should have won 4-2 because of that foul ball call that the umps messed up. The ump was right there. How do you not see that?
Yeah, I mean, they also should have, the 5th inning could have been a really key part when you had the bases loaded with Soto and Judge coming up and he got 1 run out of it. That was a major problem.
Oh, and the Judge check swing that wasn't a swing, that was called a swing. It was a great night for the umpires. Look, I know the Yankees got lucky with that Jazz Chisholm call on was it Saturday or
Yep.
But you've made up for it already. Like 3 different times in this game. They're even. They're even now. You don't need to do anything.
If you've watched the entire Major League postseason, the umpiring has been atrocious.
Atrocious.
It's been really bad.
All over the place. And I don't understand this. You're supposed to have your best umpires in the playoff series. Like, at least that's my understanding. And these guys are abysmal. The home plate ump was bad on both sides. He had some interesting strike calls for both sides. And it's just, who wants to watch a game? These are important games. All right. The series was tied coming into this game. Whoever wins this game basically has the momentum of the series. You can't have horrible calls turn a series around. And it almost happened.
Yeah, I will say too, when the lineup came out, I didn't love Oswaldo being in there. Nothing against Oswaldo, but with the way Birdie played the other day, how good he was in the field, and listen, he only had one hit in the game, but if you watch Birdie's at-bats, he was hitting the ball on the screws the entire night in game 2. And for that reason, for whatever reason, we had to change things up and get cute and change who's playing at first base. Didn't love that decision at all. I think consistency at this time of the year helps these guys a lot as opposed to not. It just felt like Boone was making a move for the sake of making a move, kind of like the bullpen decision. And you basically waited until you had no option but to go to the bullpen, which is what they did when they brought in Holmes, which I didn't love. I thought Clark Schmidt was good. I did. And I thought he was dialed in for a lot of the game.
Yeah.
And then I think he started to panic and go a little stir crazy once he saw the bullpen warming up as soon as he came in the 5th inning. And Stacey, it just goes back to, and I was texting a lot of people during the game about this, and I think it's the truth. What is the obsession with getting to the bullpen as quick as possible?
It's the new age of baseball. God forbid a pitcher throws 5 full innings.
It's also an Aaron Boone thing too. Like you can't let the guy work through an issue. Clay Holmes was up as soon as the 5th inning started. Before Clark Schmidt had a chance to get himself into trouble, Clay Holmes was up. It almost felt like Boone was dying to get to the bullpen. Like he couldn't wait to get to the bullpen. I don't understand it. It makes no sense to me. And it just felt like it was too premature. And I think there is something to Clark Schmidt walking out to the mound and seeing the guy up in the bullpen and being like, well, what the heck do I got to do to be able to pitch in this game? I think there's a little bit of an annoyance that gets into your head, and that could have to do with control issues. But other than that, Clark Schmidt was good. He wasn't great. He wasn't an ace. He was good.
Yeah.
And I think they needed that. It was a big start out of him. And I will say too, I do not agree with starting Garrett Cole in game 4.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't really either. We're going to talk about that in segment 3. What was I going to say? I completely lost my thought. Oh, let's give credit to Clay Holmes for the job that he did. Clay Holmes, Canely, Weaver. I was a little worried about
Weaver to me is the guy out of the bullpen with the biggest storyline.
I was worried about that move, and they were hitting the ball hard off him in the first inning that he pitched, and then he looked like a completely different pitcher in the 9th inning. It was amazing.
I think he settled down. I think it's a lot to ask a guy who has never gone multiple innings in Major League Baseball, but definitely has never gone multiple innings to close a game out in the postseason. And now you're asking him to get a 5-out save, which is something that they didn't even trust. They didn't trust Holmes to do. They never trusted Chapman to do, really. And now you're asking Clay Holmes to come in and give you not Clay Holmes. You're asking Luke Weaver to come in, get you a 5-out save. Has he been really good? Yes. But I don't know if I would have trusted that necessarily at all. And they did. And he was incredible. He really was. I mean, everything about how he pitched, he was very stoic out there, didn't seem to panic. And he was getting hit hard in the first inning, but it seemed like once he got to the dugout, he was like, all right, I can do this. I only got 1 inning to go.
Yeah.
He came in and pitched. He was dialed in the 9th inning.
Yeah. Good job by all. Thank goodness. But it's almost like Boone managed the bullpen thinking there was an off day tomorrow, because now what happens in game 4. But
I think you treat these games one game at a time. Like you don't think about tomorrow. You think about right here, right now, get this win, and then we deal with tomorrow. At this point, if the Yankees win a World Series, but Luke Weaver's arm falls off, you take that.
Right.
That's what the Cubs did with Chapman.
Yeah. Let's hope that doesn't happen.
Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can take aim at week 6 of the NFL with that $5 bet. This Sunday features a battle of two teams that entered 2024 with hope, but are now just trying to grasp at any relevance possible as the Jaguars travel to face the Bears. The little Bears are 3-2. Chicago is favored at home, but only just. FanDuel has the Bears as 1.5-point favorites. So what are we waiting for? That's FanDuel.com to get started.
The people want to know what the atmosphere was like tonight at Petco Park.
Yeah, obviously it was not electric as it was in Game 3. I can honestly, so I was here in 2022 for Game 3 and 4, and even when the Padres were losing in Game 4, obviously it was a closer game, but it was a different buzz today. I don't know, it was kind of flat from the beginning. Mookie gets the 1 home run, and, I thought it would have been more. Honestly, I was a little bit disappointed in the sense of I've been there before in games where they were losing, and it was a lot more electric.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It did seem like the Dodgers did a pretty good job taking the fans out of it because they were, obviously fired up beforehand. But I think they've maybe gotten so used to having a big lead early in the game that it was kind of a shock to them that they were down 5-0 after the top of the third, and just kind of, basically in Dave Roberts speak, the Dodgers came out and punched him in the mouth, right?
Yeah, that was exactly what we wanted, exactly what we needed. And, the 1 run in the first was cool. Obviously, Mookie loves the first inning right now, but getting those 2 without the homer in that next inning, getting to the seaside of the game, getting into that bullpen, and then continuing to add on, even later into the game. It was one of those things where when we were building a path to winning the series, we said the offense had to do it, and, the bullpen guys would get the job done, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, the formula, like you said, offense and bullpen, and that's exactly the 2 parties that came through here. 8 different relievers pitched to 9 innings. Obviously, the Dodgers scored 8 runs. The number of the day was 8. There are a couple questions for you in the chat, Vince, that I will throw at you. First, somebody says, Vic says Vince needs to go to the game on Friday no matter what. The good news, Vic, is that Vince has to go to the game on Friday for his job because it is an elimination game. That's why he was there tonight. Vince will be at all the potential elimination games, so he will be there Friday. But a couple people, Mike Aranda and Ike, both asked how you were treated by Padre fans. I assume you weren't fully decked out in Dodger gear since you were there as working media?
Yeah, a little bit different since I'm pretty much in neutral gear. Nobody – actually, where I was standing for the game, getting in conversations with Padre fans, they don't know that I'm the Dodger fan. They assume maybe I'm a Padre fan or neutral. So they were saying things to me like in confidence in a sense, whereas if I'm a Dodger fan, they probably wouldn't have said those things. So it's kind of funny on that end.
Spill the tea, Vince. Is that the kids say?
Just like, Ohtani, the gambling thing with Ohtani, and Dave Roberts is soft, and all this other stuff, and the normal things that fans say against the Dodgers.
All right, that makes sense. Let's talk a little bit about the bullpen game because it was a decision that Dave Roberts made. They had Landon Knack available, and they like we said, they announced after Game 3 that this would be a bullpen game. And then Dave Roberts even said earlier in the day on Wednesday that Landon Knack might not pitch at all. It would all depend on how the game was going. And as it turned out, Knack just pitched the 9th inning. And there was talk once after Gavin Lux's home run, the Dodgers were up 8-0 at that point. And, Joe Davis and John Smoltz kind of talked about how, okay, this might mean that they can just go to Landon Knack for the rest of the game. They can save Blake Trinan and maybe Daniel Hudson and not use them. But ultimately, Dave Roberts ended up using him personally, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts, Vince. Personally, I loved it. I thought it was a very step on their neck move. We are not – it was at that point, we're going to win this game. We want to complete this shutout. We want to dominate this game because, to whatever extent momentum matters 2 days later, we want to make sure that we are the team that made a statement in this game and not the Padres.
Yeah, one, you just have to secure the win no matter what. It doesn't matter if you have to use your best guys, even if it was 10-0. And the fact of the matter is it didn't get 8-0 till later. And at that point, like, you trying to have it pitch since game one, so like getting in some works out. And you really want to make sure that there's no way this can spiral out of control. You don't want to get the crowd back in it, which is a big part of it. And you don't want guys going into Friday having good at-bats with them. And maybe a couple guys got hits there at the end for the Padres, but for the most part, they didn't, and they didn't score a run. So there's not as much confidence as maybe there could have been.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, just the whole, once they used Kopech in the third inning, I was like, yes, like this is what I want. I don't want a traditional bullpen game. I want to, the Dodgers are up 5-0 in the third inning, and they're using Michael Kopech. I'm like, awesome. This is the time, because they're still 6. I joked with my wife when it was 5-0. I was like, they're going to have to be up by at least 10 runs before I stop being nervous. And I thought I was exaggerating, but then even when it was 8-0, I was still like, why am I still nervous? There's 3 innings left. They're up by 8 runs. But you never know. This Padres team is very, very good. And so I loved the approach of go with your best relievers. I guess this brings up a question that one of our insiders asked that I'll throw out. Steve from Long Beach, he said, I just heard Rick Monday on the radio talking about how none of this pitching sequencing is scripted. Dave Roberts going by feel for who should come in next. Then I got home and turned on the TV, and Joe Davis is saying it's going by script. The whole thing is scripted so far. So far, so good with the pitching. What do you guys think? Scripted or going by feel? And I think, Vincent, and tell me what you think. I think the answer is kind of both, because I think there were some things that were scripted here. I think Dave Roberts knew who he wanted facing Fernando Tatis and Manny Machado, the 3 or 4 times they came up. And beyond that, I think everything else was kind of go by feel. How can we work to there? And Dave Roberts said during the game, he said he's counting outs. And I think he was also counting batters until those guys. I feel like that heart of the Padres order was the part that was scripted as far as who's going to face these guys.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't scripted inning by inning. They might have had one like ideal world inning by inning, but I think it was one of those where we know who's starting the game. We know who would come in after, depending where they're at in the lineup. And then we know who we want when it gets back to the top of the lineup. And we know who we want in certain areas. And, I think the guys in the bullpen had an idea like, hey, you're probably going to pitch earlier in the game and you're probably going to pitch later in the game. Like, I think Michael Kopech knew you're probably going to pitch earlier in the game. And I think Blake China knew you're probably going to pitch later in the game. And I think everyone else is just kind of, hey, this is who we think you might face. This is where we might want to get you in. This is what we're kind of expecting out of you. And, you go from there. But obviously, yes, it was a touch and feel. I don't think Dave Roberts planned on using Vesia that way or planned the way it went with Vesia. And it ended up all working out. But there was, some decisions that maybe weren't, as we, like say, analytically driven. They were driven by feel, and he felt it right. And the guys did the work.
Yeah, and clearly it was all communicated well. Michael Kopech knew he was going to be coming in early. All these guys, like everybody was prepared for their role, and everybody executed it perfectly. It was, and I just said yesterday, I think managers get too much credit when things go right and too much blame when things go wrong. A bullpen game might be the one place where that's a little different, because there's a lot of decisions to make in a bullpen game, and this is where Dave Roberts' real strong suit, which is communication with players and stuff, seems to shine, because they seem to really be ready for their roles, and everybody executed perfectly. It was a beautiful game from a Dodger standpoint.
Yeah, and like I said, we talked about this yesterday. Like, Dave Roberts doesn't always get the praise when guys do their job, and guys did their job, but Dave Roberts did his job. And honestly, like I think I mentioned, I don't know how many times the Dodgers have done a bullpen game, but I feel like it works out more often than not.
Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live event even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time.
This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast. Glad to be teaming up with Eric Crocker of the Locked On 49ers podcast for our latest Locked On Crossover Thursday special. Two bitter rivals rekindling their rivalry at Lumen Field, and both coming off of tough losses last week in Week 5. Croc, it does feel like this is a game where both these teams, even though it's only Week 6, it does feel like this truly is in that must-win territory for both these teams at the top of the NFC West.
It definitely is, and for different reasons. You know, I heard Nick Bosa say, technically, because there's a lot of games left, it's not a must-win, and it's not like you're eliminated from playoff contention if you lose this game. But with everything that's really on the line for the 49ers, you know, losing a third straight game to a divisional opponent, really starting off like really bad, especially for the 49ers standards, you know, 2-3, and the 2 wins, we talked about it before, hit and record. You beat the Jets, who just fired their head coach. You beat the New England Patriots, who look like they should fire everybody. So they don't have any good wins, and you had 2 bad losses on games where you were leading in the fourth quarter by double digits and found ways to lose those games, as well as get dominated by the Minnesota Vikings. And if it weren't for the great play of Fred Warner, who forced a fumble in the red zone, really on the 1-yard line, and got an interception in the red zone, that game really could have been a blowout. So 49ers not playing great. They definitely need that get back on track game. I'm not sure it's going to be the Seattle Seahawks, but yeah, we're interested to see what happens.
I want to ask you straight up, what has gone wrong so far? Because look, the 49ers, we know the injuries. Both these teams are dealing with a lot of injuries right now, but there's still a lot of talent on both sides of the football. Do you view this as a situation where the injuries have really played into this, or some of the departures in the offseason? They did lose some really good players in the offseason. That's the price you have to pay when you've eventually got to pay Brock Purdy, and you have a number of other players you got to pay. But what has really been the big storyline in regard to why this team is 2-3 coming into this primetime game?
You know, anytime I think you lose a guy like Christian McCaffrey, who's down with really 2 bad Achilles injuries right now. We thought it was just 1 bad Achilles. It turns out it's 2, and he's doing everything possible to, you know, so that he can play soon. And we'll see when he actually gets on the field. I think they opened up his window for return right now, but not having him and how important he is to this team in the red zone, having to play, you know, a game or so without Deebo Samuel and some of the other guys that have been hurt. I definitely don't think that helps, but the 49ers have a plethora of weapons. They have guys that play well, and even some of the reserve guys like, you know, Jordan Mason, who is playing in place of Christian McCaffrey. He's playing well. He's one of the top rushers in the NFL right now. I want to say he's only second to Derrick Henry. Last I checked, he may be near the top now, close, but definitely like in the top 3. So he's running the ball well. He hasn't caught a ton of passes, but he's caught the ball well out of the backfield. It feels like the 49ers receivers are kind of taking turn as to who's going to take over a game. Is it going to be Brandon Ayuk, the guy they paid a ton of money to? Is it going to be Juwan Jennings? He's had a very dominant game, especially against the Rams, going for 175 yards and 3 touchdowns. Or is it going to be Deebo Samuel, who has led the 49ers in the receiving yards against the Minnesota Vikings? So they have a lot of guys. George Kittle as well. He's missed the game, banged up a little bit. But I don't think we can use those things as excuses, because in 2 of the games, the 49ers were dominating the games. The 49ers were up double digits against the LA Rams. Well, you squandered that opportunity with late turnovers, and the Rams go down and they win that game. You're terrible on special teams in the fourth quarter. That's not ideal. And then you're playing the Arizona Cardinals, another game, up double digits in the fourth quarter, and you end up fumbling late in the game. The defense, turns out they have trouble getting stops late in that game, and Kyler Murray makes a little magic, does a little something out of nothing, and all of a sudden you're losing 2 games where you feel like you should win. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's almost like the losses by the 49ers are more self-inflicted by just bad timing of certain issues, as opposed to not having the guys to be able to win these games on the field.
Yeah, they've had so many injuries, but you mentioned the turnovers, and that feels to me like that is really the equalizer with this football team right now, because they're still producing turnovers on the defensive side of the football. They have an even turnover margin, but they're near the top of the league in terms of turnovers. And I believe, if I'm correct, that they have 7 fumbles this year. and they've lost a handful of those. And then you get the 4 picks by Brock Purdy. So it has felt like this team coming in, like just something is off. The vibes just aren't quite where you would expect for a team that has so many players returning from the NFC champions last year.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you go back to the Super Bowl, right? Fumble in that game. And I think turnovers have been a big issue for the 49ers. How do you fix that? We could say, well, Jordan Mason, he fumbled the ball. It would be Christian McCaffrey, where I just talked about the Super Bowl. Christian McCaffrey fumbled early in the Super Bowl, so he's prone to turning the ball over. I could think of big games last year against the Dallas Cowboys where Christian McCaffrey fumbled inside the red zone. I could think of the Minnesota Vikings game going into the red zone where the Christian McCaffrey fumbled as well. So he's had his problems kind of holding on to the ball a little bit. We've seen Jordan Mason do that same thing. But ultimately, I don't know if it's rust. At first, I thought, teams aren't really playing a lot of guys in the preseason. Maybe they'll take the first quarter of the season to just kind of get back in that groove. But it looks like the 49ers, especially late in these games, are still trying to find that groove. I think they play extremely well for the first, few drives where they're scripted. And even if they get stopped on that first drive, they pick back up and they do a really good job of getting a lot of points in the first half. But last game, we saw the 49ers 0 points in the second half against the Arizona Cardinals. And partly because, well, you lost your kicker. You talked about injuries. You lost your kicker in that game. So they had to go for it one time on 4th and 18 because they felt like that was out of their punter, Mitch Wisnowski's range to be able to kick a field goal, even though he hit one early in that game. That was much closer, though. It's just been just bad. Like it almost feels like the signs of a bad team. And I don't know if we're making excuses for them because we have higher expectations. And, oh, no, this can't be the 49ers. They're supposed to be great, right? And that's all they've shown us for the most part with Kyle Shanahan, especially with this team when they're loaded. But right now, there's something not quite right. And Super Bowl hangover, maybe. But I think they're looking for that game. I thought it was the Patriots to get them back on track. Maybe it's the Seahawks, and then all of a sudden they get their swagger back and they start feeling better about themselves and playing better for an entire four quarters.
I want to look at the defense real quick because the last couple of years, this has been a top 5 scoring defense, and they're not terrible right now. They're ranked 12th in the NFL, but you've got a new coordinator, and Seahawks fans are familiar with Nick Sorensen, who was on Seattle's staff for a long time, but you've got a new coordinator. You lose Javon Hargrave for the season. They still don't have Dre Greenlaw back. I mean, there are some major losses on that defense. Hufanga's out for at least 4 weeks. So when you look at the state of that defense, particularly with the fact that Seattle, even though they've been inconsistent, this is still a top 10 caliber scoring offense, and especially the passing game. Where is this defense at right now in terms of what you expected going into this season?
The 49ers throughout Kyle Shanahan's tenure have had a lot of turnover at the defensive coordinator position. And not because the coordinators have been bad and you've had to replace them. They've actually been the opposite. They've been very good. You have Robert Saleh. He goes to the New York Jets, takes a head coaching job there. D'Amico Ryans, he ends up coming in. All right, I can do a great job. He does a great job for the 49ers over the years he was there. And then you had Wilkes last year, who it wasn't to the standard of Ryans. And a lot of people dogged him. And I think Kyle Shanahan, some of the players, they weren't on the same page with him and whatnot. So they made a move from the booth onto the field. And some people are like, man, what's up with that? So it just wasn't a great, I think, mix between head coach and the defensive coordinator. So now they go with Nick Sorensen. And that's a guy that you've gotten in-house. He's been around the 49ers for a couple years now. Like you said, coming over from Seattle. And if you ask the fans, they want him fired right now. And now he's had some injuries, things he had to deal with, right? Like you would love to see Hufanga out there. You've had Travarius Ward, who's kind of nursing injuries here and there. I think there's some young guys that they're getting in the mix and they're trying to figure out a really good rotation for those guys. Just lost Gross Matos. He's going to be out for a while. That was a free agent signing. They were expecting to make a huge splash. You have Leonard Floyd. He's had a sack, but he hasn't made maybe as many splash plays working opposite of Nick Bosa as you would like. Fred Warner, he's been consistent guy, maybe the most consistent guy on the defense, maybe in the NFL at a position as far as dominance goes. But I think there's a lot of moving parts, and they're still trying to figure out how to get on the same page with Nick Sorensen and exactly how he wants things ran. So hopefully, throughout the first half of the season, they kind of figure that out. But that has been something where I'd say if you listen to the fans, they are very upset with how the season has started, specifically on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, I have found, especially on social media, that if you're listening to the fans on firing coaches, it would be like 2-week-long windows because that's what fans tend to think. Like, there's fans wanting
They
Mike
loved him
Macdonald
after week
fired
one.
after the last 2 games.
Oh, week one, they loved him after the Jets game. And then after everything else, it's been like, all right, yeah, fire him.
It's truly week to week when you're talking about social media with fans.
Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can take aim at week 6 of the NFL with that $5 bet. This Sunday features a battle of 2 teams that entered 2024 with hope, but are now just trying to grasp at any relevance possible as the Jaguars travel to face the Bears. The Bears are 3-2. Chicago is favored at home, but only just. FanDuel has the Bears as 1.5-point favorites. So what are we waiting for? That's FanDuel.com to get started.
And Pats fans, at long last, the day will finally arrive this Sunday when rookie quarterback Drake May supplants veteran Jacoby Brissett and becomes the starting quarterback for your New England Patriots. For a lot of you, this has been a long time coming. You've been waiting to see Drake May in this offense. Help to make this offense go, look a little bit better, at least be a little more exciting. Well, I can tell you from those that I've spoken to close to the organization, there is a lot of support that is being driven behind Drake May. I can also tell you that in an ideal world, the Patriots would have loved to start Drake when he's fully ready and behind a strong offensive line. But given the way Jacoby Brissett struggled in this offense, especially behind the offensive line in the first few games, they chose to opt for a quarterback with off-script ability and big play talent to help turn these things around. And make no mistake, Drake May can go out there and make the big-time throws that you saw him make at North Carolina. He'll be fun to watch. He's also made an awful lot of progress when it comes to reading and manipulating coverages. This will be a much more exciting offense on the field. But is he fully ready? Is the team around him ready? Well, those are the questions we're going to answer here on today's episode. So let's start with why this is a good move. And first and foremost, folks, I mean, how can you go wrong starting Drake May and those red throwbacks that the Patriots are going to be wearing this Sunday against the Texans? Pat Patriot, white helmets. Drake's going to be looking dapper. The team's going to be looking great out there. Genius marketing by the New England Patriots. Well, if we're being honest, that's a plus, but that is not the reason. Let's face it, folks. When you look at this offense, and they've sunk to 31st in the league in scoring, just 12.4 points per game, and last in average passing yards at 119.4, all of a sudden that 4-game losing streak starts to make a whole lot of sense. And it also starts to make sense to the coaching staff. They need to turn things around, and that's exactly what they're going to do by starting Drake May. Because for as much credit as he's gotten by a lot of members of the media here in New England, myself included, Jacoby Brissett simply has not been able to get the job done. He's holding on to the ball too much. There's hesitation. There's a lack of anticipation in his throws, and it's becoming evident on the field. Teams have caught on to the blueprint on how to beat the New England Patriots. You stack the box to prevent the run, you blitz, play man coverage, put a lot of single high safety looks, and force Jacoby Brissett to hold the ball and make the Patriots pass catchers try to beat you. So far, that has not happened. And again, this all comes back to Jacoby Brissett holding the ball just a little bit too long. Seems like he's mentally preparing himself for the worst on each and every drop back. That's going to force him to miss open receivers, even when the pocket holds up. And when your quarterback is not delivering in that situation, no matter how tough they are, no matter how well-intentioned they are, and no matter how hard they're trying, and believe me, folks, I can tell you from personal experience, Jacoby Brissett is a worker and is doing the best he absolutely can out there. But there comes a time when a team needs a change. And that's exactly why the Patriots are choosing to make this move at this time. When you look at film on Drake May and what he did at North Carolina, this was where he really leapt off the page. In fact, it's why Drake was described as the ideal fit within an Alex Van Pelt offense from the moment he was drafted, even before he was drafted, because he has the big play ability. He's got the big arm. He can make things happen. He can take his teammates around him and make them better. Last year with the North Carolina Tar Heels, Drake completed 63% of his passes, 3,608 yards, 24 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He also ran for 9 touchdowns. So there's definitely an opportunity for him to be able to make things happen with his legs. Everyone knows about his elite arm strength. No one's questioning that. That's undeniable. But in watching him this summer and in getting the chance to watch the limited action that we saw him in the preseason and in the regular season, you can see that velocity. You can see that touch on the ball. He can make any throw required of him, including when he's asked to throw the ball into tight windows. So from a receiver's perspective, this is going to be a welcome change. Guys like Demario Douglas, Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, Tyquan Thornton, if he still has a future here, probably a conversation for another day. But bottom line, these guys are going to love this change. Not that they didn't like Jacoby or not that they didn't respect Jacoby, but Drake May has the ability to go off script and make things happen when, if we're being honest, that's really not Jacoby Brissett's strong suit. So right there, it's an upgrade going from Jacoby Brissett to Drake May. I also don't think he gets enough credit for the agility and the instinct he has to know when to turn those off-script options into big gains. Drake is one of the better navigators on the field that I've seen come out of the college game in quite some time. And I think that's going to translate well into this offense. One of the things we keep hearing about Drake May and the progress that he's making is his ability to read and manipulate coverage, seeing the entire field, surveying it, and then picking and choosing the areas in which he wants to exploit it. That's what a quarterback does. That's what an NFL pro quarterback does. And Drake May is doing that better and better each and every time he steps on the field. His footwork has improved. His instincts are getting sharper, and he's showing an ability now to be able to navigate a pro-level offense that he didn't necessarily have when he walked through the door here for rookie minicamp a few months ago. Again, I don't mean this to be an indictment on Jacoby Brissett, who I really do believe gave his best effort behind a makeshift offensive line, receivers that were having difficulty with routes and getting open, and a running game which provided some relief, but not quite the relief everyone thought it would because of early problems with ball security. But once again, the Patriots need a spark here. They'll get that from their young quarterback. And in my humble opinion, it's going to be a lot of fun watching Drake May attempt to navigate this offense starting this Sunday against the Houston Texans. But a lot of you out there are wondering, why against the Texans? This team is 4-1. They've got a pressure-packed defense. Patriots are taking on a 1-4 Jacksonville Jaguars team in London next week. If he sputters a little bit, it's not in front of a hometown crowd, or simply wait until after the London break and give him the start in week 8. There's some merit to this thought process. And again, that's because handing the keys to a rookie quarterback in what is a very bad quarterback situation here in New England right now comes with a significant set of problems.